Okay, well, my name is Drew Pickens. For those of you that don't know me, I'll put my name up here. I go by many things. Drew, Droopy. I got the name Droopy when I was a kid, so I go by that sometimes. But I'm really honored and happy and excited to lead us our discussion on the Intertestamental Period. I don't know, has anyone ever studied this before? Anyone ever studied the time between the Testaments? That's pretty normal. It's not something that we really do a lot of. And we don't think about it a lot. I think we just kind of, especially if you grew up in the church or you just kind of picked up, the Gospels and you picked up the book of Acts and you just started reading, and these things are so second nature, you don't even really think about it. But if somebody was to start reading the Bible on their own and just cruising along, and they made it all the way through to Malachi, and then they turn the page over, and there's a heading there, and then they get to Matthew 1. If you had never grown up in this, never raised in this, never gone to a Bible class before, you'd probably go, did I miss something? Or some pages ripped out here? Did something happen? Who are these Romans? Where'd they come from? Who are the Pharisees? What's that? Who are these people? I never read about these people before. What happened? The Intertestamental Period explains that and really helps us to understand a very smooth transition. We think it's smooth. It was very rocky for them, but it's a smooth transition from the Old Covenant to the New, and so the Old Testament to the New. So really, I'm going to throw out a couple thoughts for us to chew on and think about. We talk about this intertestamental period, the time between the testaments. What is a testament? What is it between? Yeah, Jim. It's an agreement. That's good. Yeah. That's good. How else can we describe it? It's a contract. Yeah, agreement. A contract's a bit more binding than agreement. Yeah. A covenant. Yeah. A will is a testament. You've read last will and testament. It's this is the deal I'm going to make with you, right? You hear anybody being cut out of the will? They didn't keep up their end of the bargain, right? They got cut out of the will. So yeah, it is an agreement. It's a covenant, and it can also mean to bear witness. And we use the English language, so we have to understand these have been translated in our language. So you ever heard something say that is a rod is a testament to fortitude and resilience. What does that mean? How can he be a testament to fortitude and resilience? Proof, yeah. Bearing witness to it. He is evidence of it, right? So when we think about the word testament, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about we have two different agreements here, two different witnesses, two different covenants, right? Why two covenants? Why did that even happen? Say that again? We failed the first one? That's interesting. What do you think about that? The
first one violated multiple times.
Okay. Who violated it? The people violated it? Okay.
And it was two different stories.
That's two different stories, but why the need for two stories? Why the need for a new covenant? Was it because we failed the first one, that we got an easier one, the second one that's harder to fail? Prepare us for the second. So the second one was going to come all along. Ooh, that's an interesting thought. Yeah? What do you think about that? I mean, were we bound to fail the first one? I think there's a very interesting, philosophical conversation we could have around were Adam and Eve doomed to fail anyway? Was that going to happen? I mean, I don't know the answer to this. But it's an interesting thought. I mean, was it just, if they didn't know right from wrong, is it inevitable they would do wrong? If you don't know right from wrong, are you going to stumble into wrong? Yeah. I mean, so I think so, but that's just my 2 cents for what it's worth. I mean, it's pointless to even have that. But the same thing with the law. Was it possible to keep the law? Impossible anyway. So is it a matter of we have a new one because we couldn't keep the first one that was impossible to keep anyway? Or as Rob kind of said, wait a minute, is it setting us up for a more perfect law? Preparing us? Now think about, if you had children and they just instantly were adults, I gave birth to an adult, Would that be the best thing? Hang on just one second. Would that be the best thing? If you, as soon as a child was born, you put them in an incubator, and they grew up to be 18 years old in an incubator, and you put them up, swapped them out in the world. Okay, go be an adult. No childhood, no discipline,
No experience.
no schooling, no understanding who your parents are, what they expect of you. Just go be a grown-up. Would that have worked?
Yeah.
It's kind of what we're trying to do now, and we see the results of that. As opposed to, there's some benefit to living in your parents' house for 18 years. You know,
We
getting
learn
spanked
a
few
lot.
times. And what was that?
We learn a lot.
We learn a lot. Yeah,
They teach
yeah. We learn some lessons in a protected environment. And think about that. We don't want to necessarily get into the Old Testament, but think about that. Why do we have this transition? Why do we have two different things? And how did we move from one to the other? What was happening there as we moved from the other? Jim, you have a thought?
What you're talking about basically is what Adam and Eve experienced.
Yeah.
They were born,
No.
they were adults.
Yeah, that's true.
When you study the Old Testament, the New Testament, you realize the new agreement is a lot better.
Oh, a lot better. I mean, I'd much rather be, well, it's so funny, isn't it? I mean, my wife and I talk this all the time. You know, I love being an adult. I love the freedom. You know, I love I'm not having to ask my parents for money. I'm not having to ask when I have to be home. And I'm not having to ask to borrow the car. I'm not having to, right? But what comes with that? Yeah, I got to work for a living. I mean, I saw somebody recently said something about that. It's like, you know, nobody told me that growing up meant I had to actually get up at 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock and take a shower and and do my hair and put on some clean clothes and go out and work. If they had told me that when I was 16 years old, I may have said, hey, this isn't such a big deal. I don't want to, you know. So there's something nice about being able to go back home and living under my parents' roof, you know. And that's kind of what the old covenant was. I'll take care of you, but I'm I'm all you need, you know. But what is mankind's nature? Yeah, right. Bust out of that. I don't want that. I want to go live on my own. So yeah, just some interesting things to think about. You know, why do we have this transition? This is going to come up time and again as we talk about this. These two covenants, these two agreements, separated by about 400-year period of time. Our Christian Bible and the Jewish Bible do not have any canonized writings that take place during that 400-year period of time. Now, there are some historical writings that we can reference, and there's lots of things, right? I mean, Mike could write a book, and I could think, oh, it's good stuff, Mike. I'm going to learn from that, but it's not scripture. It doesn't mean I can't learn from it, right? It doesn't mean I can't go, oh, this is his experiences in the Marine Corps, or whatever. It's good stuff. I can learn about that, but it's not canonized scripture, but it's definitely worth hearing his thoughts, right? So we have writings like that in that period of time there that we can reference. But there are also, this is very interesting, we think God was silent during that period of time, but he spoke of what was going to happen during that period of time. It's actually very fascinating how accurate some of that is. The book of Daniel, Ezekiel specifically, talk about what's going to come, what's going to happen during that period of time. It is creepy scary how accurate. Ezekiel mentions somebody by name that won't be born for another 100 years. He mentions him by name. That is scary. Some of the things Daniel talks about, apocalyptic prophetic writing like that, it's kind of hard to, what are you talking about? At the time, you go, I don't really know what you mean. But when you look back, you go, ooh, that's what he was talking about. You ever seen something like that in your life? You know? Maybe your parents said, you know, what's going to happen as you grow up, and you don't know what they're talking about. But then you look back 30 years and go, that's what my dad was talking about. That's what he was talking about.
And I'll with it.
Yeah, I see what he was talking about. Yeah, Jim?
That's what happened with Jesus and his followers. He told them what was going to happen.
They understand. Yeah, that's exactly
And later, then they understood, oh, this is what he meant.
This is what he's talking about. Okay. Yeah, it's really hard to understand. If you just read it in a vacuum, you're like, I'm going to say that, Revelation is kind of like that. This isn't a study of the book of Revelation. But it's kind of like that. It's like, what? But when it's all been fulfilled eventually, I think, we'll look back and go, that's what he was talking about. And some of it you can do that. I personally believe some Revelation has been fulfilled. But Daniel's like that. It's like you look at it and you go, that is really creepy how accurate they got some numbers here. And they also mentioned some nations that have now risen to prominence. He said, that nation's going to do this, and they do it. I mean, so it's really crazy. So God speaks about it, talks about it a lot. And then, of course, when we get to the New Testament, we read about things that didn't exist. Come on in, bring a good seat. When we read in the New Testament, we read all kinds of things that never popped up in the Old Testament. What is this? How am I supposed to know what this is? How am I supposed to know what this? I don't even know what this means. Again, if you just sat down and you read through, you'd be like, I don't know what these words mean. They don't come from Hebrew. They come from something else. So I'm going to throw a big question out for you. When you think about the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Old Covenant, the New Covenant, compare and contrast those for a minute. And what is different about them? Can you rattle off some things that are different about the two Testaments? What are some things that are different about the two Testaments?
Well, the priesthood.
What about the priesthood?
Well, we got a priest that priest forever, and he's a priest.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we have Jesus Christ, the Messiah. Okay, so there's a Messiah has come in the first covenant that wasn't in the second covenant, that wasn't there in the first covenant. That's one thing. That's the big one.
Well, you can do it on your own. In the Old Testament, you did everything on your own. I mean, you relied on you following all the little all the little instruction we were given.
Yeah.
And if you mess it up, that was it. You don't have that again.
Yeah. I'm speaking, that's completely, absolutely true. I'm asking about just the books themselves, the New Testament, the Old Testament. What is different about them? Not the covenant. That's true.
That's a big
That's true. What's different about them? If you're going to read through, what is different about how they read? Yes.
Well, the old agreement was referred to as the law of sin and death.
Okay.
And the new agreement was the law of liberty.
Yeah, let's think about that for a second. In the Old Testament, you got sin and death. In the New Testament, you have liberty. Whoa, that's an interesting contrast. I'm going to write a book about sin and death, and Ron's going to write a book about liberty. Which one would you rather read? Would you rather read Ron's book about freedom and liberty? Would you rather read mine about sin and death and punishment? What would you rather read about? I'd rather read about liberty. I'd rather read about hope, right? I'd rather read about opportunity. Yeah, okay. What else? What else is different? Go ahead.
The Old Testament, someone is coming. In the New, someone has come.
Oh, love that. It's coming. He's come. Very nice. So, I like football. So the only thing, the only sport I really care for is football. And I love listening to football shows, but there's two different kinds of football podcasts. There's the one that's always trying to predict what's going to happen this week. They're always trying to predict, and they're making, they're trying to guess this and that. And then there's the one that analyzes the game that took place last week. I personally like the one that talks about what just happened. Analyze the game. I want to talk to you about the game that just happened yesterday. I don't have this predicting the future stuff is nonsense. You none of you know what's going to happen, but we know what happened, right? I'd rather read this. Tell me what happened, right? So yeah, nice. Someone else out there.
You know, law and grace.
Say that again.
The law and grace.
The law and grace. Okay. Are we getting a theme here? What else? Differences.
The Old Testament has poetry, and there's no real poetry in the New Testament.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting take. A lot of poetry. How would you describe the writings? Let's look at not the Gospels, the epistles.
Instructive.
Are they instructive? Maybe.
Well, the letters that Paul wrote to all the churches, that they were Timothy, they were instructive.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is how we know what we're supposed to do and not do.
Yeah. I think I'm a little differently, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I think you're on something there.
I think it teaches us the history of the church.
Okay. They want that history. Yeah.
I mean, it's very historical, well, both on both sides, but on the New Testament, a lot of facts, a lot of what was happening, so you would know for the future how the church should be.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
actual history.
I'm gonna describe. Now this is. I will say it's my opinion. This is my opinion. I'd love to hear yours. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I would say the New Testament makes an argument. But the Old Testament doesn't make an argument. If you think about it. The Old Testament, Proverbs is probably the closest thing you'd probably find to like making an argument. You know, where it's saying like, it's good to do these things because of this. But for the most part, what is the Old Testament? History, poetry, law, consequences, warnings. There's lots in there, right?
It's the beginning
Evidence.
also.
What's that?
The beginning.
It's the beginning, yeah. It's the historical account. Right, origins, that's good. Right? Most of the New Testament
say
is
the Old
making an
Testament.
argument.
The Old Testament is dead and over, and the New Testament's living and ongoing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that's living in the Old Testament too, I think, but you're right. It's fulfilled, I guess, is probably the word. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You said Proverbs with an argument. I would argue that Ecclesiastes
Please
is
do.
more of an argument.
Okay, there you go. There's yeah. Same type of writing, right? You're saying here's a good way to go, and here's why, right? The New Testament is full of that. And even Paul in his writings is using that method to make this argument. In fact, he even says he would go into the synagogue and let's reason together. They would reason together. This study is gonna make the case that probably wasn't possible before this transition happened. If you're in the Old Testamental time, it would have been very difficult to just show up somewhere. I'm gonna go to the capital of the Persian Empire and make an argument. Yeah, you're gonna lose your head about 5 minutes into that. You know what I mean? The world was not ready. The world wasn't ready for that. Wasn't ready for someone to show up in the town square in a place like Athens and just make an argument. Right? To just talk about your gods and my gods. This was possible because of things that happened during this period of time. And that's why this idea here, the fullness of time, this idea that the world was made ready for this, when the time was right to do that, for God's messengers to go out into the world and do what had to be done. If you think about the Old Testament, who were God's people in the Old Testament? Israelites, right? Is there much evidence that it spread very much? I don't think there is. There's maybe a little bit. You could argue a little bit, but for the most part, their mandate was not spreading the nation outside of their people. That really wasn't the driving force, right? So there wasn't any reason or need to go and make these philosophical, religious arguments to these nations that weren't godly. That wasn't the thing. Jesus even, you see, there was a hesitancy there, to go and that wasn't what he was there for, right? But the New Testament, that's all it is. Who are God's people under the new covenant? Everybody. Well, how's that going to be possible? How's that going to be possible if where I'm going isn't prepared for that? If I don't have a language that allows it to happen? If I don't have a transportation system that allows me to get everywhere? If there's not a stability in the region that allows me to travel about? They talk about this all the time with some of the ministers that we're supporting in some parts of the world. It's very unsafe. It's very, very unsafe to go and just cross borders and start doing things. But you had things happen during this period of time that made the world safe to do that.
It was more acceptable.
It was acceptable to do this. It was not acceptable to do this before. We're going to find this out a few of our lessons in, that the Greeks that came about during this period of time, before they conquered the area of Palestine, they had developed a philosophy of logic and reasoning and talking about fate and making an argument in science. They were the origins of that philosophy that didn't exist before. Plato and Aristotle, people like that. Well, Aristotle was a tutor of Alexander the Great. So when he goes and conquers all that area, what do you think he does? He's what they call Hellenizes. You ever heard this word before? He Hellenizes the two Hellenizes the conquered world. So Hellenic is a term for Greece, Greek. That comes from Helen of Troy. You ever heard the old stories about Troy? Helen was a very beautiful Greek lady, and there was a war broke out because of her, basically, because fighting over her. Okay, so that this term of Hellenizing, Hellenic, has been associated now with Greece. So that Hellenizing of that area created the ground within which that philosophy can be spread. Imagine if we go, think about the parts of the world that we've had influence on, right? That we've Americanized, right? Forcefully or not, right? Sometimes it's forceful and sometimes it's passive. But we kind of Americanize, right? What if you say you're going to Americanize some nation? What would that look like? What's Americanizing?
When we walk, talk, dress.
The way we dress, the way we talk, yeah.
No, I would say Starbucks.
Starbucks, yes, sir. Yeah. I've done a lot of traveling in my business, and if I saw a KFC and a McDonald's, I knew America had arrived. You know, it was usually a KFC and a McDonald's, and then it became Starbucks.
English language.
The language? Are they speak English? English?
Almost every country.
Yeah. Will they take dollars? If I went in and spent, greenbacks with those, would they take them, right? Or they go, this doesn't do any good. Our culture, our pop culture, right? Do they know who Taylor Swift is? And whoever our people are. Are we infecting them with our culture, right? And our value system? Maybe democracy is a way of Americanizing, right? Are we taking out the dictator and trying to replace him with some kind of representative form of government or something like that happen, right? So if you're going to Hellenize someplace, what are you going to do? You're going to infect it with the Greek culture, the Greek language, the Greek clothes, the Greek philosophy, right? Thank goodness they did, or Paul could never have gone to Greece and wash up on an island in the Mediterranean and preach to these people and go to Rome and right? It wouldn't have been, and unfortunately the Romans absorbed that philosophy too. They went, that's actually not a bad idea there. They end up being in charge. We're going to find that out, right? So this all allows this to happen, yes, ma'am?
Just to say that, the Rome, it says all roads lead to Rome, but it was more the Hellenistic that actually infected everybody. Because when I'm teaching science, it's all Greek words. Roman or Latin is used for the names of animals, but when we talk about anything in science terms, it all goes back to Greece. It's kind of odd.
Yeah, Latin's good for animals and legal terms.
Right, but all the rest of science is Greek words.
A lot of Greek words. And not only that, but I'm sure at some point Latin borrowed some things. I mean, I've been reading a few books about this, and we won't get into this level of it, but even the Roman gods were just, they took the Greek gods and just renamed most of them. Yeah, they took the attributes. It's kind of like, countries that are listening to our pop culture might take some things in and then they use their language and morph it a little bit, right? But they're taking the ideas from the stronger culture, right? That kind of is pushing the ideas out. So yeah, this Hellenizing allows this, my 2 cents, I don't know if you're going to arrive at the same conclusion with that or not, but allows this to happen. Right? Not only the Greeks, but the Romans provide the environment, I'll put it that way, within which this can happen. The Greeks provide the foundation within which it can happen, things that need to happen. What are some words that we read in the New Testament that aren't in the Old? Just some things. Maybe some names, some places, some things. Some things you might read.
Faith.
Say
Faith. That
Faith.
is not a word that was used in the Old Testament
Yeah.
as much as it is in the
it. Okay, interesting. Okay. What else?
Baptism.
Baptism. There you go. Yeah. The concept of that, where did that come from? Yeah, we're going to look at that. Very nice. The Pharisees. Any Pharisees in the Old Testament? Where did they come from? Here these people are running the church, the Jewish faith, very prominently, in charge. Who are these people? A chapter ago, they didn't exist. Where did they come from? The Sadducees. Well, who's that? Right? Okay, you have to understand this. This right here to figure out where these people came from. Who are they? Why do they exist? Why do they stand for what they stand for? And how did they get in a position of authority? And they were pretty influential. They were the ones that had Jesus put to death. I think we need to figure out who they are and what were they trying to do, right? What about the synagogue? Any synagogues in the Old Testament? How's that possible? It's just a temple. Yeah. How's it possible that synagogue didn't exist in the Old Testament, but the Jews in the New Testament, bless you, are worshiping in the synagogue? How'd that happen? It happens here. We got to figure out what happened. How'd that happen? Oh, and by the way, teaser. Where did Paul go to as soon as he arrived in a new town? He went to the synagogue. That's interesting. What if the synagogue system had never come about?
You've heard the recent people.
Where's he gonna go? Come on in. Where's he gonna go, right? If there's no... Yeah, exactly right. This is where the people who already are believers are gathered. I can find them. I can go there now and make my argument, right? So the synagogue system appears during this, and for a reason. There's a reason why the synagogue system appears. And so we're going to look at that as well.
Well, Jesus went there too. As a child, then as an adult,
Yeah.
went to the synagogue.
Yeah, he did too. That's exactly right. Yeah, Jim.
Faith appears in Isaiah and Habakkuk,
Okay.
but the Old Testament is full of faithful and faithfulness.
Yeah. Yeah, I think faith so.
I kind of did the concept of what faith means to us in the New Testament, because the word being present.
Yeah. I think you're kind of hovering here.
Yeah.
You know, I choose my faith versus my family told me
Maybe
to do it.
grace would have been a better word. I think I
Grace.
should have said grace instead of yes.
Yeah. So I just want to kind of close out this point that you see two completely different writings. It'd be like if I wrote something in my style and someone else went and wrote something in their style, right? Say Annette goes, she writes something in her style. Wouldn't you agree they're going to read totally different? They're going to feel different. They're going to sound different. They're going to, they're coming from a different place. I don't know. There's a little bit of overlap. We share the same faith. Beyond that, I don't know. Our background is the same. So they're going to feel different. And so as we're going to find out, why do these feel so different? What caused the origins of this to be such that it looks and feels so different? So about a 400-year period of time to cook, right? To kind of brew and stew and get us ready for the new covenant to come about. So we said a little bit ago that there are no prophetic or no canonized scriptures that we have that take place during that period of time. Okay, so God, through his prophets, is silent during that. He speaks what's going to happen there earlier, but during that period of time, there are no writings that come out of that. Why do you think that is? We've got this new, more perfect law coming. Why be silent about
Just people anticipating it and ready to accept it, and it does show up.
it? Anticipating?
It's kind of building up the anticipation of it.
Yeah, don't you think they were probably getting pretty hungry for a prophet? That's all they had for 2,000 years, right? They were probably getting pretty anxious. Yeah, that's good. Building up the anticipation. What else?
Besides the fact that it's God's timing, it's perfect timing.
Okay. But why is that perfect
No,
timing?
no,
Why
I
is
would
it?
say, besides the fact of that,
Yeah.
that God's timing is perfect timing, I don't know.
You know how
He prepare the way, just like you said.
you know how in football you run the ball, 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 and then what do?
Yes.
Deep shot, right? You set them up just right. Why is the timing just right? I don't know. It just felt you had them set up just right to take that shot right then, right? Everything was in the right spot to do that.
They were no longer using their own leaders, they were conquered.
That is
So,
very true.
that conquering causes a yearning to get back to your leadership.
That is very true. Without giving away too much of suspense what's going to happen for the next few weeks, but I would argue that this is the result of a really dumb decision that was made probably around 1050 BC. And it took 500 years for that dumb decision to finally come home to roost, you know. And what do you think that dumb decision was?
King.
Yeah, it took a king. They said, I want a king. But there are so many lessons here, folks, for us today. So many lessons baked into this. They want a king. We want what those guys had. Right? Have you ever heard people say this? We want to be like Sweden. You ever heard that?
Yeah.
If you just gave us the form of government that Sweden has, everything would be great.
No.
Okay? Why want to be just like this other nation over here? They've got it so good. And what did God say?
You're not gonna like
You don't think you're like it. What's going to happen when you have a king? What's he going to do?
Oh,
enslave
He's going to take your best stuff.
that's right.
He's going to take your sons, your daughter. Yeah, it's like, no, we want a king. 500 years later, the nation of Israel is gone.
take your land.
Yeah, it is gone. Yeah, and they go on, and so during that time, God said, "All right, if this is what you're going to do, then this is it. I'm trying to work these kings. I'm trying to get this just right." And finally gave up. That's it. We're going to learn a lesson the hard way. It's very interesting the thing, you know, what is predestined and what is the result of our decisions. I mean, would Christ have come sooner? Maybe I don't know. You know, but by 532 BC, the nation of Israel is gone. I mean, they were conquered in about let me take the exact date here. So, you know, and next week we're going to go over some historical timeline here to get this all in context. But right around the late 600s, the northern kingdom is taken off into Assyrian captivity, never to ever be heard from again. Gone. I mean, like, they were the really bad ones. This is like getting conquered by the worst, right? This would be like, you know, imagine the worst invaders you could ever have come in and take it. You're gone. Yeah, you just go. I mean, put a hook through your nose right now. Yeah, you're gone. Right? It's bad. The southern kingdom, Judah, hangs on a little while longer, not quite 100 years. They end up getting absorbed by the Babylonians. The Babylonians were there, I personally believe, to do the bad stuff, and they get wiped out pretty quick by a kingdom that is a little more tolerant. They're the ones that let the Jews go back and rebuild. So here's another word, Jew. Where'd the word Jew come from? How many times do you hear the word Jew in the Old Testament? I think it's in one book. And it's, yeah.
Also the Israelites.
Yeah, that's the New Testament.
Israelites, but not.
Yeah, where did that term come from? Yeah, so we're going to talk about that. Here's another thing. That comes out of what happens when the kingdom starts to go. So I think this comment, we'll close this comment out here, is that the kingdom's gone. God's people as a nation are no more. In a physical sense. There is no more kingdom of Israel anymore by about 530 something BC. Right? They're gone. There is no more kingdom anymore. Right? There were a few prophets that come along there to help them with rebuilding the temple and the wall, to give them encouragement, but the kingdom's gone, right? And kind of the last closing thought we'll share with here is there's a setting of the table that's happening during this period of time. Now, if you think about, if we're going to, say my wife and I are going to invite a few families over for dinner, right? What are we going to do for a while? We're going to talk a lot about who should we invite, when should we do this, what should we have for dinner, do you want to play some games, do we want to cook out, do we want to have a fire, you know, all that discussion, right, might last a few weeks. then what happens when you invited everybody and they know everybody can eat ribs, right? Nobody's got an allergy to corn on the cob. Everybody's okay, right? Okay, once I get all that established, what do I do then? Set the table. Yeah, prepare the house. Clean up the house, vacuum the carpet, get some wood for the fire, go to the store. It's the set, no more discussing it. It's setting the table now. And this is really what I believe is happening here. Just setting the table. The discussion time's over. It's get it ready because we're going to have a big feast here. And we've got to make sure everything's in the right place. Everything's in the right order. Things are, before this time, the Israelites are actively involved in their own fate. If you think about it. Actively involved in their own fate. They're making choices. They're making dumb decisions. They're repenting. They're assassinating their king. Whatever it is they're doing. They're actively involved in their own fate. At some point, as you understand what happens during this period of time, they are just, it's happening to them at this point. They're not making any, they make one other really, really dumb decision. They're going to see that comes home really good. But other than that, they're just kind of like in the middle of, it's like when we had little kids and we're getting the house ready for company, I'm like, get out of the way. I'm setting the table. I'm setting the table. Go put the stuff in there. They're not making any decisions here. It's happening to them. And so that's really what's happening during this period of time. Is things are happening to them to get them ready. There is a cleansing that takes place a couple different times. We'll see this common theme, this cleansing or this remnant. There's a remnant that just keeps hanging on. Is it M-A-N-T? So that's what I think. It's a time of cleansing. It's a time of cleanup, getting it ready. Yeah, that's really the story of this. Thoughts? Yes, sir.
Jude appears in
Yes, sir.
2 Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles.
Okay. Yeah.
It's
it-
all through Esther.
Yeah, Esther. I know. Is it a big? They're being referred to as Jews, right?
Ezra, Nehemiah,
Yeah.
and then a lot of the prophets.
Late, right? Late prophets, like after Babylon captivity. Or,
Israel, Isaiah, Jeremiah.
Yeah. Like you notice in the Torah, in the writings of Moses, they don't refer to themselves as Jews.
2nd Kings is the first,
Yeah, Second Kings would be that's late.
and then 1st and 2nd Chronicles.
Yeah. So this term comes about as a result of something that's happened. And so we're going to see. It really comes to fulfillment during this New Testament. Thoughts about that? Just ideas. I mean, what comes to mind as we think about this idea of the church, the body, his people being kind of going through this transformation and God's interaction with us. What are your thoughts about that? Is he silent today?
Answers prayers.
So was he? What was that, Donna? What did you say?
He answers
He
prayers.
answers prayers. All right. So is it true or good to call this a silent time? It's been 2,000 years. Time of preparation, yeah, or
There's no many revelations,
yeah.
but His word is living in.
Yeah, you come on something really interesting there. We're going to find this out in a few weeks that when we think about the Jewish Bible, that Jewish Bible that we use, those first 39 books, those, during the first 1,000 years of them being written and compiled, they didn't ever say, this is our Bible that we read today. It really wasn't until this period of time came along, when the nation had been cleansed almost the last time. Almost the last time. There was one more cleansing to come. But almost the last time is when they said, it's time to get everything together. Gather everything up. What are all the writings we have? And put them through a process to say, are they inspired? Are these the Word of God or not? There are things that they discarded during that time. But that's the time in which when they got their writings and their act together. Because again, remember the second table, get it ready. They knew something was coming. Jim's really onto something there. Something's coming. Messiah is coming. Let's get it together. Get everything organized. They got their Bible. They didn't call it the Bible. Get it together. Get it organized. That effort, Ezra started that. So we're talking somewhere around 450 BC. Started that effort, and it lasts to today. Our Bible, our Jewish Bible today, the first 300 books are exactly what they got together then. It's exactly what. So it's preserved. It's amazing. We're going to talk about how that happened. So they got it locked up. They got it locked tight. Okay. So really, during this period of time was them kind of getting it organized. You know what else they did? In about 165 BC, this is not exactly understood exactly what's happened, but somewhere around there. So 200 to 160, probably closer to the 160s. You know what happened? A bunch of zealots, the remnants, ran up into the caves, took their writings, and hid them away. Put them in clay jars, hid them in these caves, because there was some really bad stuff was happening to the nation of Israel, the people of Israel. And so they hid there was somebody who was trying to wipe out the Jewish religion. So they went and they hid everything away, everything they could. Thousands of scrolls. Hid them away. These people may have been killed. I don't know what happened. Because what do you think happened about 2,000 years later? 2,000 years later, when the nation of Israel was founded again as a nation, and the land again became kind of peaceful a little bit, we could go and look around. Let's go look around this new house we got. We moved back into our family's old house. We need more of that. Let's move back into mom and dad's. We're moving back into grandpa's house. What are we going to find? Look around the attic in the basement of grandpa's house, and what do we find in these caves? Scrolls 2,000 years old that are exactly like what they have. Exactly right. It's exactly the same. So it just says two things. Number one, A, that is God's will. I mean, I think there's something there. I believe that. But also, it proves their method of preserving the scriptures was very, very, very good. They were very good at preserving. It was letter for letter, word for word, exact. So fantastic that those folks did that. So think about it. Here we are in the 20th, 21st century, trying to defend our faith. People will say, well, that Jewish Bible just made up. You wrote that 800 years ago or something like that. We can go and say, no. Did God provide that for us today because we might need that today? Maybe, right? So, to fullest time, I'd encourage you to read Galatians 4:4. I'll just leave you with this real quick as we wrap up. I know we're at time. Galatians 4:4. But when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law. Right? So he came under the law, came of a woman when the time was right. And that's what this is going to talk about. How was the time right? How did it get right? Yes, sir. That's fine.
Yes, some people claim that the prophecies that were written weren't the prophecies that were history, that someone wrote later after it happened.
Yeah.
And then they wrote those prophecies. But then when they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found copies that were older than they said they were written.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and the reason for that, the reason that they were saying that was the Jews had a whole process for copying the word letter for letter, word for word, numbering each letter, because as soon as a Bible here, as soon as a Bible got damaged, or as soon as their scripture got damaged, they ceremonially burned it. They didn't keep old scriptures hanging around. So they didn't have any manuscripts that were 2,000 years old. The oldest Hebrew manuscripts date back to like 800 AD. They don't go back very far. So that's why these modern skeptics are, well, he wrote this stuff around 800 AD because that's the oldest manuscripts you have. Well, the reason they did that is they destroyed all the old manuscripts and they would get tattered and torn. But they had an exact process for capturing that stuff. The Dead Sea Scrolls proved that. And you're right, they found some writings that were hidden in a cave probably around 200 BC that predate Christ and predict, they talk about the Messiah coming. So yeah, miracle. Thank you so much. I hope you come back next week. We're going to start looking at the history of the Hebrew nation and kind of leading up into that period of time where they go off into captivity. We start to see the events start to happen. Sound good? Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate y'all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day and good worship. See you after.
Thank you.